Well, welcome to another edition of Indy Star Preps Weekly. I'm joined today by Tony Leach from SVI Sportswear. He's the CEO and also Prep Ball Stars. And Tony gets out to a lot of basketball games, so wanted to pick his brain. He was at the city championship last night, and we're gonna start off talking about that, and then also touch on kind of some general high school basketball as well. But Tony, thanks for coming on here with me.
Thanks, Kyle. I appreciate being on your show.
No problem. Well, Tony, let's start with that game last night. Last year it was sort of an upset when Attucks beat Cathedral. I think everybody was a little surprised, and Desmond Briscoe kind of had a breakout performance in that one. This year, at least in my opinion, even though Attucks was seeded 2, I kind of, I think we texted back and forth a little bit yesterday. I kind of gave Attucks a slight advantage, I would say. So
Yes.
honestly didn't feel like an upset, and it was 71 68, but it was, it felt like Attucks was in control for quite a bit. But, what's your takeaway? I mean, this Attucks team, they've got it all. I mean, really, I mean, they've got Briscoe in the middle. They've got Chris Hurt. They've got Ron Rutland, Mason Lewis, who might be the first guy to win county and city
I
championship.
believe he is.
So they've got everything, but just your impressions of last night's game and how it went down.
Well, first of all, I mean, I love the city championship. Being from a city school, aging myself here, went to Marshall, so I remember being a senior and being a witness to a 4 overtime game between Marshall and Arlington, which we unfortunately lost. But so I've loved that championship since then. And as you know, you were there last night. It was a great atmosphere. The crowd was into it, but very respectful. The announcer said, "Hey, don't rush the floor." Everyone complied to that. So it was just a great game. A lot of respect amongst the coaches and fans and players, and so that was really good to see. In addition to just an amazing game, both teams just really played their hearts out. As you mentioned with Attucks, I mean, they had, I believe, nine players, I believe, that scored last night. So they are a true team. And I actually went up to Demetrius Jenkins last night because he started. He scored the first 4 points of that game to kind of ignite them, and didn't score after that. And I told him how important that was because I mean they won by 3, and so he started off with the first 4. So, and he kind of looked at me like, "Oh yeah, I guess that was important." So, but you mentioned a lot of the guys. I said Mason Lewis, who's actually the son of Gerald Lewis, who I went to Marshall with and actually played some sports with. Um, first time in the history, county and city champion. But Jackson Payton also was in double figures last night. I believe he had 13. He was huge for them last night. But everybody that came off the bench, whether they started or came off the bench, they really came into the game with an attitude of winning as a team, and that's what they did. But Cathedral, they really fought back. Very impressed with Brady Kohler, Kaler. He was outstanding. Led all scorers with 27, but also Aiden Hughes. I mean, he's one of those guys. If you're going against him, you hate him, and if he's on your team, you love him. And he had 2 or 3 charges and drawn and lots of offensive rebounds. A pivotal one towards the end there, and also I think he had 13 points as well. So, but it was just a great game to be a part of.
Yeah, the city, like you mentioned, to me, it has kind of a different feel than the county. The championship being on a Monday, it's the only game around really on that night for the most part, or the only big game, and it just has a cool vibe to it that it's hard to explain it exactly, but it's just a little bit different, of a feel to it, especially a big game like this one where everybody knew, and you always end up with a pretty good matchup on that Monday night.
Yes.
So it's kind of, unless you're there or gone to it a few times, it's hard to explain it, but there's something cool about it, and it
Yes.
definitely lived up to the billing. One thing I took away, Tony, from and you kind of, I was going to touch on it. You kind of got to it first. Was Brady Kaler. To me, going into this year, I didn't really know. I mean, I'd seen him play before, seen him in the summer a little bit. Knew he was a very talented kid. But man, he showed up and to a game that it's a big game. There's a lot of butterflies and things like that. And he, even in a losing effort, I thought I was like, wow, okay, this guy, I see why he's getting these big offers. And man, he was really good, especially in the second half for that team.
and he's not done with offers. I mean, I had seen him play before, but he's a different player now. His build. I mean, I described him as Stretch Armstrong long last night, and I know that's probably going over some younger people's heads, but I mean, he's just super long. And I was talking to one of the Notre Dame assistants this morning, and he's got an offer from Notre Dame now. So they were I think the first Power Five conference offer for him, but he's going to get more. He's talented, quick release. He did a lot of great things last night to keep Cathedral in it. Now, Cathedral was missing a really
Mhm.
big piece for them, and I do want to mention that Keaton Aldridge, their sophomore, I believe he's a leading rebounder, second leader in scoring, and he's just one of those. He would have. I mean, he definitely would have been worth 3 points last night to him. Don't know if they would have won, but not having a player of that caliber really hurt Cathedral. But they made up for it with some really good play from some other players.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Aiden Hughes, also a very good football player for Cathedral. And the last couple of games I've seen him play, had a major impact. He kind of filled a little bit of what Aldridge can do, although Aldridge is a better prospect, moving forward, and he definitely would have helped them too. But I
Yes.
really, after seeing this Cathedral team play a couple times, or I guess I've probably seen him 3 or 4 times now, but I understand what Jason Delaney was talking about going into the season. Even though they are kind of turning the page, a new chapter with so many different guys, I get why he likes his team so much. They play a style that's very together. Derek Kennedy, he shot the heck out of the ball in the semifinal,
Yes.
but he's also very unselfish. He's a good leader. He understands how to play. He wasn't taking shots out of the crazy shots. I mean, he's just a very good player too. And then LeBron Goff didn't have his best shooting game last night, but he's a good piece too. So
Yes.
I get why he likes his team a lot.
You know what's interesting with Derek Kennedy? He came into his high school career known as a shooter. He's one of the top shooters in that class, and hasn't been that. Certainly wasn't for his freshman sophomore year. So to see him have a breakout game Saturday night, I was really happy to see that because I've heard nothing but rave reviews about him in terms of how hard he works. Now the way he got on the floor is he's a really good defender. He really works hard on defense, gets a lot of deflections. So that got him on the floor, at least at the varsity level. But if they can get him to be consistent with that shot, it's really going to make them tough. The other takeaway I would say with the game overall, just watching those two teams, could both of those teams win the state of Indiana? And the answer to me is yes. I mean, it takes a lot, I mean, heck, they could lose in the first round to each other, in that sectional, that sectional 10. But I think that if one of those teams can get through sectional 10, which you got Cathedral, of course, and Cathedral Attucks, North Central's in that. I mean, it's a rigorous Lawrence North, number one team in
Yeah,
the
don't
states in
don't
that
forget.
section. So if they could get through that sectional, lights out. I mean, they've got the team if they can certainly get Aldridge back healthy, both of them have the teams that could go a long way from there.
Well, you beat me to my next point because I was going to ask Attucks. The question with Attucks: can they turn this city championship now into something that's really special? And I got the sense talking to Chris Hawkins and Desmond Briscoe. He was very adamant that sectional, regional, semi-state, state. He listed them all off in succession when I talked to him after the game. But I think the question for Attucks now is can you turn this into some momentum? They've got a lot of big games coming up before we get to that point, including Ben Davis
Yes.
on Saturday. But I think a lot of the Attucks fans and obviously the coaching staff, they believe that this could be a team playing at Gamebridge Fieldhouse at the end of March.
Yep.
And like you mentioned, though, it's such a tough bracket, and it's probably honestly better. Sectional 10 is probably even better than we thought it was going to be going in.
No
So
question.
there's a lot in the way, but what do you think? I mean, can this Attucks team win state? I mean, I think that's probably the biggest question moving forward, and it's obviously hard with that sectional, but what are their chances? What is Attucks' chances to do it?
Well, here's what I would say about Addicts. They have a lot of talent. That's the good news. But having a lot of talent sometimes can be bad news too, because you're trying to integrate a lot of pieces. You've got, players that can kind of go rogue on you with their family saying you need to score more, you need to do that more. So if you can kind of corral all that and really get everyone to buy in. And they also we've mentioned Mason Lewis, but coming in from North Central and being a starter and integral piece, that takes some time, to get buy-in from everyone. Maybe there was a kid who thought, oh, that was going to be my spot this year, those sort of things. So if you can get everyone to buy in, and Chris Hawkins is a person for it. I mean, he's got a sort of a quiet demeanor, but you can see in those eyes he's got a rage and fire in him to get his players to play the way that he wants them to play. We saw it in 2017 when he won the state title. He has a similar team to that, where he's got some guys, a lot of guards that just, whether they're starting to come off the bench, they just come off with a vengeance. It's funny because you know how Twitter can be when you spell it right. I spelled Addicts right, and a couple of times it changed it on its own to Attacks. And but that's a good description of them.
Yeah.
They attack their opponents, and I think Chris is saving some things too, because I didn't see I don't think they pressed last night, and they definitely have the type of team that I think once they get into, want to get. And I haven't talked to him about any of this, but I'm sure that they'll probably pull out the press a little more than they do, because they've got guys that can come off the bench and do some things with a lot of energy. And having that many bodies, guards, they can keep everybody fresh.
Yeah, I like their team. I really do. I think, and I think winning the Hall of Fame, winning the city, that just kind of builds a base of, of belief and confidence and those sorts of things you need. And they had that even going back to last year, winning the city. So they're just kind of building a stronger base of things you need going into that sectional, which is going to be so tough.
Yes.
But I really like their team. I think that, like I said, I think they've got the pieces there. And I completely agree with what you said about, can you kind of keep the continuity, keep everybody kind of pulling on the same rope and everything. And, that's important for a team like that, where you could have guys kind of who like, honestly, like Ron Rutland, who didn't score a ton last night and who's been a leading scorer for them at different points. And I know what he's like. I mean, he's not going to go the other direction, but it just, sometimes you have to have a little bit of that all for one to get a championship. And we saw it with Ben Davis last year. Honestly, they were a team that was kind of like that, where you could have had guys complaining, KJ Wyndham coming off the bench, things like that. So it takes a little bit extra, and we see teams that don't have that fall along the wayside every year.
Right. And they have a similar makeup to that Ben Davis team. They've got senior leadership at the guard spots. You mentioned Ron Rutland. He's a junior all-star. He could have came into this season and said, you know what, I got to score 20 every night. I got to score. He hasn't done that, and he's certainly capable. He's one of the top scorers, without question, one of the top guards, one of the top players, period, in the state of Indiana. But sometimes he's not their lead. Several times he's not their leading scorer. They probably have 5 or 6 guys lead them in scoring this year, including the guys we've mentioned. So, but again, he's a senior. Jackson Payton's a senior. Mason Lewis is a senior. I believe Hurt and the big boy Briscoe are juniors.
Yeah.
But so just like Ben Davis, they got a strong post in the middle with Briscoe. They've got solid guard play on the wings and at the point guard position, and they've got some solid guys coming off the bench. So they definitely could win the state. But again, it's that sectional 10 is it's tough. They could go out in the first round. So they know that going in that they've got to come to play. But long before it's sectional, they've got a couple more months here to get ready for that. You mentioned Ben Davis over the weekend. So they've got several games left on the schedule that's going to help them get ready for Sectional 10.
Well, again, a great city tournament last night. It was 71-68 championship game. Attucks beats Cathedral last night at Tech. And just real quick, Tony, too, just to wrap up the city, the city is not, I was talking to some people last night, we've lost a lot of, flavor from the city tournament. You're a Marshall grad, a lot of those schools that Arlington, Broad Ripple, Northwest, Howe, schools that we used to see in this tournament and sometimes win it, or at least be in the championship or the semis at least, are gone now. And the city, it's a little bit top heavy right now. And, Washington, I think, is a team that's intriguing and getting better. But what are your thoughts? I mean, it's just it's a little bit top heavy with Attucks and Cathedral, and maybe none of the other teams right now are ready to compete with those two.
Well, I mean, it's been a final game of really Cathedral Attucks for a good while, man. I think a couple of years ago it was Cathedral Tech.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got some other teams that are capable looking forward. I think Tinley's got a lot of young talent, and they're more of City Alliance school, not a traditional city school, but they do play in that city tournament. I think they could be a factor, later on. I think a year or two from now. Tech also has some pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And Damon Turner's doing a good job over there in their own building. I mean, they got knocked off in the semifinals unexpectedly, actually on the quarterfinals by Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And Washington's well coached, and they've got some players on the up and coming players as well. So for them to get a taste of the semifinals was good experience for them. So and then Chittard, and Chittard's always tough. Covenant Christian, they both have been in the semifinals over the last 2-3 years. So the city's here to stay. It's a great tournament, a great venue at Tech. One of the best atmosphere, mid-season that I've seen for certainly for a tournament. So love the event, and I think it's going to continue to grow and prosper for years to come.
Yeah, Tech, I think, will be a team. They were talking to Damon that night. They lost. I think they were 4 for 32 from three, so that was not ideal. And I think Washington's kind of a tough matchup with Butler there in
That's
the
a lot
middle.
of threes.
Yeah, that's a lot of threes. That's a
Yeah.
lot. So, but I do think Tech's, they've got some good wins under their belt. They could be kind of a sleeper in the sectional 10 as well. But Tony, just looking forward and kind of what have you said? Lawrence North, you mentioned, it's hard to say, to me, I've been putting them number one on my ballot and in our
Yes.
Fab 15, which is local teams, but then also I've been putting them number one in the state since the beginning of the year.
Yes.
I think that they're the best team overall. What are your things? I know you've seen the Wildcats play, but
Yes.
to me, they're similar to Attucks, and honestly, they played a really good game against each other. It's a 1-point game. But they have it all. I mean, they've got shooting. They've got their guards are physical. Kobe and Xavier are very physical, attacking type guards, and then they've got the bigs now too. So I'm just not sure that there's a team that's got everything that they have.
No, I said this when the season began. Lawrence North, I think by far has the most talent in the state for any team. Now, are they the best team? I mean, that's to be proven in March, but they by far have the most talent. I mean, they've got two really good guards in Kobe Bowles and Xavier Robinson, who's got Notre Dame, Ohio State offers as a junior. That's their backcourt. They got they get blessed with a move in from Colorado that's 6'8", and Kai McGrew's a sophomore with the other talent that they already had. So they're really talented. Really, really, really talented team from really 1 to about 8. Cameron Webster's another sophomore. Brennan, who's also a sophomore, about 6'6". I can't think of his last name right now.
Brennan Miller.
Brennan Miller plays for Indy Heat as well. I mean, he's a Division I prospect. Hasn't had any offers yet, but he's definitely has that trajectory. So they're really a talented team. So I would definitely say Lawrence North will be at the top of the heap. But Ben Davis, I think that not having Don Carlisle this year is going to be a factor for them, because Don had this way of really, when they weren't playing up to their capability, no disrespect to the current coach, but Don has been their stalwart, been their leader. But they can regroup, and they've still been tough, and they've got a Indiana All-Star candidate in KJ Wyndham, who's going to head to Northwestern. So they've got some talent left there. Mark Zachary, he's a football player, but I tell you what, if he wanted to play basketball, I mean, he I believe he could get to that Division I level just on his defense alone. So they've got a lot of talent as well, and certainly a lot in the pipeline. I think they lost one game last year as an organization with between freshman, JV, and varsity. So Ben Davis is going to be really tough. I've got to mention Fishers.
Mhm.
They're undefeated. There's a couple undefeated teams to mention. Fishers is undefeated. They blew out Kokomo. They beat Noblesville, who's a top 10 program. They've been really tough. They got a freshman starting point guard and Cooper Zachary, who's been a really good leader for them. They got Keenan Gardner, who I believe is certainly going to play for Midwest Challenge. I think he's certainly should be an Indiana All-Star candidate as well. So they're going to be really, really tough to beat in March. But one of the teams they may play in their own sectional is Westfield, who's also undefeated in top 5, and they've got the big fella Nick Book. So they're gonna be tough to beat and have been, and they've got some really good wins as well, including against Noblesville, who also needs to be mentioned, and is also in that sectional 8.
Yeah.
You've got those 3 top teams in the top 5, top 10 in Noblesville, Westfield, and Fishers, who all 3 again similar boat as some of the teams we mentioned are capable of making a state championship run.
Yeah, and Tony, Westfield did get fall from the unbeaten ranks this weekend. They after they beat Noblesville, they lost to Brownsburg, and then they
Oh,
beat Tri West. So they did take
oh,
one L, but
okay.
nonetheless, I mean they're probably better again than I expected going into the season. So, but yeah, it's a to me, I think, and I'm glad you brought up Fishers, obviously, because they're kind of 1A, 1B to me with Lawrence North. They press, they pretty much press the whole time, and they've got, Keenan Garner has made himself into, a much better player, and he was a good player last year, but much better player than he was a year ago. And then, Metzger can shoot the lights out. You got
Yes,
good role players. You've got John Anthony Hall is just an unbelievable athlete. Another guy, kind
yes.
of like a Mark Zachary type, where he's a football guy, but I'm sure he would get basketball offers if
Really
he,
athletic,
yeah,
explosive.
yeah, very athletic. And then the only thing, the guards are freshmen. Or 2 of them are anyway. But they don't play like freshmen. So I
No.
know they've got a good thing going there at Fishers, and the fun thing for us is those 2 teams play each other here in about a month. So it'll
Yes.
be fun to see how they play.
Yes. Jason Gardner, you mentioned the other freshman who's the lineage is there with his, Mr. Basketball dad, who's also a coach at Arizona, played a long time at Arizona as well. And he's a freshman, but again, he does not play like a freshman. He can get to the rim anytime he wants. He's got an improved shot. I've been watching him play. He's been coming to camps that I've put on since third, fourth grade. So he's a really talented kid. And Keenan Gardner got a chance to see him really up close in August at a fall league prep ball stars EPO, elite players only, and he was really the best player at the event. He's just relentless, high motor. I personally don't know why he doesn't have more offers. I know sometimes programs get a little bit more into what position is he going to play. He's just a player. I mean, you put him out there, there's going to be good results. So I definitely see him. Don't see any reason why he couldn't certainly play at that low Division I level, at least. So we'll see what happens moving forward for him.
And I'm really excited about this junior class. It just seems like, and another team we haven't mentioned is Greenfield Central, which, they are undefeated also. They haven't played quite the
Yes.
schedule some of these other teams have, but they have one of the top juniors in the state in Braylon Mullins. So, you can't, that sectional, they haven't been able to break through because they've got, Anderson, Pendleton Heights, it's a tough sectional, but
Yes. New
they're worth
Pal.
mentioning as well.
Yes. No, Greenfield Central got a chance to see them last month when I was doing some games for the IC network, and they're good. I mean, they've got a pretty rigorous sectional as well to get out of, but because they could got Mount Vernon in that sectional as
Yeah.
well, and but if they can get through that sectional, they're a sleeper in that regional because when you've got a player like Braylon Mullins who's capable of getting you 40, which he's done already this year, then you've got a chance. And they've just got a lot of guys that this come off the whether they come off the bench or start, that they play a role and they shoot the ball really well. I mean, I think they're shooting, I think over 40% from the three as a team, and they shoot free throws really well. So when you have good shooting numbers, especially when you get down to March, and you're down by one, you're up by three, and you really need somebody to knock down a shot from the free throw line, and you've done it all year, it really gives you a better chance.
Well, thanks so much, Tony. I'm sure we could talk about every team that we see at length, but we don't need to do all that just now. But but appreciate you talking with me. We again, the city championship wrapped up Monday night, and Cathedral fell to Attucks 71-68. But Tony, again from SVI Sportswear and Prep Ball Stars, and Tony, what what are the plans for the event, the Midwest Showcase this year? Do you have that set yet?
Well, we'll have everything finalized in terms of location and date, I'd say in the next couple of weeks, but this is going to be at least live. It's going to be year 6, and we're looking for another great event. I mean, we've had star-studded players in this event. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton, who's starring for our very own Pacers, played in the very first event. Jake LaRavia, who's a pro now, Blake Wesley. So we've had about 8 or 9 pros. Kobe Buffkin, who's in it with the Hawks. Jalen Johnson, who's also with the Hawks, was scheduled to play in 2020. So it's an outstanding event. Team Indiana has three-peated. So we're going to see what Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan have to say about that in terms of stopping that 4-peat. But all the games have been competitive, and every game last year was decided by, I believe it was 7 points or less. So it could have went either way. So it's not like blowouts. These are hard-fought, competitive games, throughout the history of the event.
And Tony, that'll be what, April probably?
More towards the end of April, maybe early May.
Okay, good deal. We'll have more information on that when the time comes. But great talking with you, Tony. And again, always enjoy talking basketball with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
You bet.